This episode will be completely taken out of context. Welcome to the Fact Check This podcast. All right, Fact Check This conspiracy theory, which is Fact Check This podcast episode 34. And I ran through the list of conspiracy theories that some friends had posted to the Facebook page, and I got my conspiracy theory hat on. And the one that came up the most was kind of dealing with the deep state and just a lot of other facets involved with that. JFK and Lincoln's assassinations, 9/11, the Great Reset, what is it, Project 2030, or what was the Agenda 2030, and just all the different stuff that, and because all of those really kind of tie together, and all of those really kind of tie together with the things that I wanted to talk about anyway, we are going to throw all precaution to the wind, and no disclaimers of not to sound like a conspiracy theorist. I want to go full conspiracy theorist on this one and just do it, because I really do think that the more I look at and think about these things, the more I kind of believe that they really are deeply connected and entwined with each other. So first of all, just like to take the top right off of it, like the Agenda 2030 and the Great Reset and all that stuff is very entwined with the whole deep state thing. And the big thing with the Great Reset and the Agenda 2030 is that's not even conspiracy theory shit anymore. Like that, they have come right out and given the entire game plan for it and explained how they want to go about doing it. Like we've gotten well beyond conspiracy theory with that, but with the way that kind of goes, I mean, something kind of conspiracy theory-ish, but that seems to be less likely to be a conspiracy theory and more likely to be an actual like truth of the matter, is looking at the way COVID has been handled and the way they've kind of gone about dealing with all of that, where they've taken a pandemic or a crisis or something, and honestly, for people who've been looking at the actual science and the numbers and everything on this, it's really not what it's been made out to be, but it presented the opportunity to create this mass pandemonium and to start the gears turning for this worldwide reset, the Great Reset, within the next 10 years to have everything be on one, like this new world order of one global governmental economic system and creating this massive thing. So it is interesting to look at that, because it's not all that conspiracy theory related anymore. Like it's becoming real life. But the Agenda 2030 and the Great Reset conspiracy theories state that, you know, it's going to become this like global socialist economy, that it's all one world government and everything, and it started with, when you're looking at it, it started with COVID, and they shut everything down. They put everybody in their homes. They forced compliance on everybody with the masks and social distancing, and then they've pumped money into the economy over and over and over again. Like, and that's not just happening in the U.S. That's happening all over the world. Is they're doing this stuff all over the world, and so it's creating a lot of the same problems everywhere. But it's putting people, it's removing us from our ability to communicate with each other and to talk to each other and to meet with each other and to organize and to gather. It's kind of throwing the world into upheaval, and they are simultaneously completely wrecking the economy. They are completely taking over the means of supply for everything. Like all of the supply chains have been disrupted and kind of reset. The banks, for all this money that's getting pumped into the global economy to kind of reset everything, or to kind of stimulate everything, it all goes to the banks first. So it's all getting washed through, and it's building this foundation of they have control of everything, There is nothing that the government doesn't touch when all this is said and done. They're completely shuttering small businesses, so they're the only ones who are left to be in control of things are going to be the big, huge multinational corporations that are already heavily in bed with the government to begin with. So they are doing away with everything individualistic about our world, especially about American society. They are actively trashing all of that in favor of creating this completely top-down organized socialist like socialist run everything basically. I mean, like I've talked about this before on other episodes, but you know, it's they are overrunning everyone who could stand against them to supply for the supply and demand side of stuff. Like, the demand doesn't change. They have disrupted the supply chain and taken control of it, and now they get to dictate who can give you the supplies you need, who can give you the food you need, when you can have it, where you can get it. Like, they have completely taken control of it. And so that gets into more of the deep state stuff, because, you know, since the creation of the Federal Reserve, they have completely destroyed the U.S. dollar. Like, we don't have money that's based on anything other. It's all magic. It's all fucking magic. Like, that's the only thing that's holding the economy together, is this belief in the value of your money, when in reality, in actual, like, backing wise, your money has no value whatsoever. It's only worth as much as what everybody believes that it is. Like, we would be seriously better served to be on a barter system at this point. Like, you would actually get some value out of your goods and your labor if we were working off of a barter system. Because as long as there is market confidence that the dollar is worth anything, then it can continue to be worth whatever we think it is. But the way they are pumping up inflation with all these stimulus packages, and then if they do roll out the $15 an hour minimum wage and all of this other stuff, like, if they roll out the $15 an hour minimum wage, then all of the entitlement programs and everything, those are just going to increase exponentially. And so at the end of it, you have blown this monetary bubble up so big that it can't sustain itself, and the entire economy is sitting on top of this giant economic, you know, or monetary bubble that's just poised to burst at any moment. And they keep pumping it up and pumping it up and pumping it up, and nobody's pumping the brakes on this. Like, Democrats, Republicans, it doesn't matter. They are both running rampant, just nonstop, full bore, you know, pedal to the metal. They're going to run this thing right off the fucking cliff, and it's all going to explode. And when it does, and the interesting thing about that is, if you want to look at it from the conspiracy theory and the Great Reset and all of that stuff, is the U.S. dollar is a majorly traded currency. Like, it is all around the world. The U.S. dollar has that value, and everything is equated to U.S. dollar, the value of the U.S. dollar. You know, other currencies they tie back to the U.S. dollar. So whenever the dollar implodes or explodes or whatever you want to call it, then everything else does as well. And so that makes you wonder, because every other country is doing this at the same time. Like, this isn't just exclusive to the U.S. This is happening everywhere right now. So that kind of makes you wonder, there are definitely people pulling the strings behind this, and they're not just people here in the U.S. Like, if it's the Rothschilds or whatever, there are people in power globally that are pulling the strings on this and making these decisions. And what is going to replace it when it does collapse? Because it's going to collapse. Like, that's not a question of if, it's when. When will it collapse? And when it does, what's going to replace it? That's what I think is going to be interesting. because we do have, and it's not going to be Bitcoin or Ethereum or any of the other cryptocurrencies. Like, it's going to be something else. It's going to be something that is, it's probably going to be something that's produced by a tech conglomerate of Amazon, Google, Apple, and Microsoft. They're going to create something that is the new digital currency that everyone uses. And so it's going to be interesting to see what that is. Like, I mean, it's going to be like Ready Player One, and everybody, exists in this online world, and everything is based on doing things there to get money there, and that's going to come to fruition. I mean, it's already at least in some part reality. Like, I get a paycheck every other week, and I never see an actual physical dollar bill of that check. It is play money that is numbers change on a spreadsheet somewhere, and it appears in my account. None of that's real money as far as I'm concerned. I've never seen a dime of it, other than the handful of actual dimes that I have floating around in my truck. I don't see any of that money. I get paid a little bit for the different podcast work I do. I've never seen physical money for any of that. It's all on PayPal and Venmo, and like, it all exists on the internet. None of it actually exists physically. So it's going to be really interesting to see how all of that shapes out, because this Great Reset thing and the Agenda 2030, it's not conspiracy theory. It is for real, and it's coming really quick. Like, for it to all be fully in place by 2030, which is kind of the goal of that agenda, it's going to get ramped up significantly over the next 4 years. And I mean, that's the entire purpose of Janet Yellen as Biden's Secretary of the Treasury. Like, they need to cut the fuse and put a blowtorch to it so they can blow this whole thing up, so that they can get us in that direction quicker if they're going to have it all happen by 2030. Who knows? It's going to be interesting to see. On a positive note with that, there has been some pushback on the lockdowns and stuff like that. Like, the Netherlands are, I think they're like 3 or 4 consecutive nights of like nonstop riots against the COVID lockdowns. So that's pretty entertaining. Italy has been rioting and protesting as well, and if they don't put an end to it sometime pretty soon, I think it's probably looming in the United States as well. Like, we're already as a country, like, Americans are already kind of poised for some revolution at any moment anyway. Like, we're always ready to go riot at the drop of a hat. So if nothing changes, you might start seeing that pushback here too. And that's something else that, like, they're starting to announce the different stuff with the COVID numbers and the PCR tests and getting that fixed, and the numbers are starting to go down, and starting to talk about opening stuff back up. Like, the people pulling the strings, they're not fucking stupid. They know what's going on, and so they're going to start doing some things to relieve some of that pressure, so that we don't blow the top off of this thing before they have a chance to really start to put all of their plans in place. So whatever you do, stay pissed off, because this is no time to start backing down. Like, we have got to stay pissed off. But then to get to the real meat of this episode, and what I wanted to talk about, is the deep state stuff. And so I'm not going to go all the way back to Lincoln. One of my buddies had asked about, or he suggested that the conspiracies for Lincoln, and it's very possible. I can't say that it's not outside the realm of possibility. But going back at least as far as to JFK and basically everything since World War II. Like, I think World War II, World War I created the excuse, and World War II gave the final push that there was no going back. Once all the gears started turning on all of this like deep state kind of stuff. But the assassination of JFK, and then also Watergate, and the removal of Nixon, because JFK was not going to toe the line. Like once the military industrial complex got to churning its wheels with World War II, and then rolling into Korea and just continuing into Vietnam and everything else, like JFK was not going to play ball. He was not for that stuff, and so he had to be removed. Like, and then it was the same deal with Nixon. Like, Nixon was supposed to be this big, heavy-handed war hawk, and he really wasn't. And so that's what, like, obviously, when we talk about the deep state, we're not talking about, the people that you see. We're not talking about the figures that are out there on stage and on camera regularly. Like, there are key components behind the scenes that are actually pulling the strings and making things happen, and it's all tied to the military and to the banking systems, because those two, if we're being completely honest, as much money is tied up in the military, they go hand in hand, and they work together to kind of pull the strings on the energy sector and on the markets, the stock markets as well. So there are people that we may not even ever know who they are, but it's that when they say the top 1% of the top 1%, like, that's still, when you consider all the people in the world and where the money is consolidated to, like, that's still a fairly significant collection of people who are working in unison. And this is, globally wide, around the globe, not just here in the US, but all over the world, that are working together to pull the strings and make different things happen. And you see it everywhere else in the world too. Like, as Americans, we only look at what's going on here in the United States, but this stuff is going on all over the world all the time. Like, there are all kinds of things that get pushed forward, and people who get killed or removed from power one way or the other. And a lot of times the U.S. government has something to do with it. But people who are not going to play ball and who are helping to establish maybe peace and stability in certain parts of the world that need to be at war for all of this, for the military industrial complex to keep churning. Like, these people are getting removed all the time. And because we live here and all we really see or care about is what we're doing here, then, none of that shit matters. But it's happening all the time. And, like, the deep state is not just the deep state here in the United States. It is the deep state globally, because the world government that they are trying to create is the state for the whole fucking thing. And they've got their own agenda that needs to be pushed. And so, like, one of the things, like, Reagan came in and he had his time, and then George H.W. Bush was just buying time. Like, they didn't have the person that they needed at that time, so he got to do his. So he just got to piggyback off of Reagan. Like, there is the theory that all of these presidents kind of have their turn, and it's all set up and it's all laid out, and so, like, there's a script and they all go by the script. And so if we, the people, the voters, try to fuck with the script, then they fix it. Like, none of our elections are actually real. We don't pick anything. It's already been picked. We just go get to pretend that we are. And that, we are allowed to believe that we are making a difference, when in reality we don't have shit to do with it. It's already been taken care of behind the scenes. So like you went from Reagan to H.W. Bush, and H.W. Bush was just filling a role to move to the next one, which is why he didn't stand a chance against Clinton. And you can blame it on Ross Perot or whatever, and lots of people do, but Bush did his time and he was being moved on from. So then you got Clinton, and Clinton had his role to play in kind of working on the economy and the global relations, and like there were a lot of, for as much as the scandals of the Lewinsky thing and everything are out there, like a lot of the things Clinton did were to ease us into more of a global government type thing. And then you got George W. Bush coming into power, and the belief on that is that Gore had won, but Gore was not the right person to lead the country through 9/11. And they knew that Gore was not the right person to lead the country through 9/11. So the election got fixed, and because like it was believed that Gore had won, and then everything got changed, and then Bush won. So Gore got to go do the climate change, be an environmentalist and all that stuff, and claim that he built the internet. And then George W. Bush got to be the commander-in-chief to be that proper figurehead who was going to lead us through 9/11. And then that feeds into that 9/11 was an inside job. They knew it was going to happen. They needed the right person in place to lead us through it. And let's be totally honest, like Al Gore would not have been the right person for that. Al Gore was, that's just, then you needed a cowboy like George W. Bush to be in charge and to lead coming out of that. And that helped drive the industrial military complex forward even more. It helped to go in and disrupt even more in the Middle East to get, because for as terrible as Saddam Hussein was, he was actually creating certain levels of stability within Iraq. So you had to get him out, and there has been no stability. It has been complete upheaval ever since then. So obviously, like, it worked. They did what they were hoping to accomplish with it. And then Obama came out of nowhere. Like, who was Barack Obama? He had been a senator from Illinois for like 6 years. Like, he was nobody. Comes out of nowhere, but he had the golden tongue and the right policy, and he was the one that they needed to push forward more globalization, more socialism, more of all of what's going on. And then look at who they ran against him. Like, look who the Republicans ran against him. John fucking McCain. John McCain was terrible. Is terrible. I don't care if he is dead. I'm not going to honor the memory of a dude that was a total war hawk and just complete trash as a politician. So they ran John McCain. There were much, much, much better candidates than John McCain. And yet you're telling me that guy won the nomination from the Republicans? Like, what? That's some bullshit. And then you come around to 2012, and it's Mitt fucking Romney? Oh, like, the most milquetoast Democratic Republican on the ticket? And there were much, much better candidates out there in 2012 than Mitt Romney. And yet that's the one that the Republicans ended up putting up. Like, you're telling me, you expect me to believe that that's legit? Bull fucking shit. So the whole system is rigged. The game is rigged. We're just allowed to think we're playing. But really, when Sean was little, I would sit and play video games. And he would get restless and cause a scene. So I would put a corded Xbox controller in his hand, and it wasn't hooked up to anything. But as far as he could tell, he was playing. And so he would sit there and he would just move buttons around, and he would smash buttons, and he would go to town with it. And he was entertained and loved every second of it because he thought he was contributing. When in reality, he had a controller that wasn't even plugged in. That's us voting. We've got the controller that's not plugged in. We're allowed to believe that we're doing something, when in reality, we're not doing shit. It's all being figured out and it's all being done for us. We just don't get to see behind the scenes where it's being done. And that's where Donald Trump comes in. Because in 2016, Trump created this movement that couldn't be contained by that system. And so Hillary, it was supposed to be Hillary. It was supposed to be Jeb Bush versus Hillary. And Trump comes rolling out of nowhere and created such a momentum that they could not stop it. Because if they did, it would completely blow the lid on everything. Like, it would prove who was really in control. So they had to let it happen. But it wasn't for the Republicans. And it didn't matter because Hillary was supposed to win anyway. So it didn't matter. Like, okay, if it's Trump instead of Jeb, whatever, we're still going to get Hillary. And then that didn't work either. And the whole thing, like the polling data proved itself to be wrong, and the whole thing got turned on its head. And so that's why they've spent the last 4 years just very, very obtusely going out of their way to bash everything about Trump and really to expose the depth of corruption that is media, the government itself, all the forms of like culture and society and everything that's out there, like the big public figures and all of that. Like, they have gone out of their way to show just what side they're all on. And then you come into the 2020 election, and that's where we really got to see it happen. Like, we really got to see it unfold, because they were bound and determined that they were not going to let this get away from them again. That's why a fucking corpse that's being propped up the weekend at Bernie style, Joe Biden, somehow got more votes than any other presidential candidate in the fucking history of elections. Like, you would expect, voting turnout to increase at a projected rate, but the rates this year were astronomical. Like, they just took and totally fucked every statistical model that could possibly exist. And like, anybody who understands statistics well knows that, like, this stuff is totally anomalous. Like, it doesn't work this way, and yet it worked that way this time. So as much as this was supposed to be the conspiracy theory episode, I don't think any of this shit's a conspiracy theory anymore. I think it's all being pretty thoroughly proven out to be reality. And watch closely, because over the next 4 or 5 years, they're going to push that 2030 agenda pretty hard. And you better be invested in something that has actual physical value in the world. Because your dollar has none. And pretty soon it's going to have less. Like, you're going to find out just how zero can be, as far as how far that dollar goes. I wish I had some crystal ball that I could see what's coming and be invested in the thing that's going to be the future of it. But there's gonna be something that comes out of, like I said in the first half of this, like, it's gonna be something that comes out of Microsoft, Apple, Google, Amazon, like a conglomeration there, that they're going to have some form of currency that they start to operate on. And about the time it starts to pick up steam, the monetary bubble that is the US dollar and global monetary policy is going to collapse. And then it really gets interesting. And I hope I'm totally wrong on all of this, and I don't think there's any chance that I am. Hope y'all have a good rest of your week. Good weekend. I'll be back next week. I got to get James on and talk about mountains being ancient trees. that was the part of my request for conspiracy theories that I found the most entertaining, and definitely I'm going to spend the most time looking into going forward, because I think that's pretty cool, and I think that could be pretty real as well. But that's for a later date. In the meantime, have a good one, everybody.